Salam, and welcome to the People of Palestine podcast. I'm your host, Saja. Welcome back to the People of Palestine podcast. Today I'm sitting down with Meha Siyam, and I'm going to get to know her for the first time through this podcast. So welcome, Meha.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
So can you tell me where in Palestine your family hails from?
So I'm from the village of Mukhmas. It's northeast Al-Quds. Both sides of my family are from there. It's actually a really ancient village. It dates back like to the Kanaani era, even before. And the name, a lot of people think it's like Arabic. If it's like Mukh means brain and Nas means diamond, but that's like, it's just cute, like brains of diamonds or something. But it's not an Arabic word. It's actually from the old Semitic languages and even ancient like Kanaani roots, but it means two things. One of them means it's like the hidden place. And if you ever see Mukhmas, it's actually like we have like two hilltops mainly, and then the village is like cradled in the middle, so it's like hidden. And the other meaning of it is Tel al-Qamar, which means the city that overlooks on the moon, because it's exactly on the road between Al-Quds and Ariha, Jericho. And Jericho's original name is like City of the Moon. So our village is named as the village that sort of can look through it or look at it.
That's so beautiful. I've actually never heard of your village before, so this is amazing to get to know more about it through you. So can you tell me like your family story in terms of like how was life before the Nakba? Did the Nakba like affect your family? Like what happened afterwards? Just give us like an overview of your family history.
So our village is northeast of Al-Quds, but because it's like, I guess, hidden, and it's a little bit farther out from what in our brains now because of how the geography changed from the occupation. It doesn't seem close to the Quds, but it actually is. Like my grandfather used to walk to the Quds and back and things. So the Nakba actually didn't affect them at all because it was mainly, concentrated in that other like main part of Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't feel anything. And then when 1967 hit, mostly the West Bank areas, that's when they started kind of interacting and seeing an effect around their village.
Mm-hmm.
One story that my grandmother told me and my mother told me is that around 1967, a lot of Zionists actually came into the village. Mm-hmm. And my mother and her parents and like her siblings and stuff, and a lot of the villagers went and hid in little caves, like we call them magharat. It's like a little cave in our olive groves. And she's like, my mom was like, we were there for days. And my grandmother, and I'm talking about my paternal grandfather, my dad's mom, mm-hmm. She and her husband and her family, they didn't leave their house. Mm-hmm. And my mom is telling me the story about my paternal grandparents. She's like, we were all shocked. Like, you need to get out of there. Like, they've heard of like everything that happened through the Nakba. They obviously know what's going on, but they haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. And so my mom's like, we all freaked out, and we went and hid in the olive groves and in the land. And my paternal grandmother and grandfather refused. They were like, we're staying in our house. Like, we don't care. And so my grandmother is telling me what happened. She's like, they came in, they looked through the village. They were like looking around for a couple of days. They didn't harm anybody at this point, anything, but apparently they just checked it out and they weren't, I guess, intrigued by it enough to steal it in the moment. Mm-hmm. So she's like, they just came and like scouted the area and left. So when they left, people like my mom and her parents, they all came back into the village and then just went back to their houses and continued living like that. Over time, decades, like as the years went on after 1967, they started stealing our olive groves that are outside of what you would call the main village. So everybody was living in like a concentrated part, but all the land around our village is owned by certain families. And so that's when the stealing started happening. They would steal the olive groves the farthest from the center of the village. Then it started getting closer and closer. And then they built actual settlements on our land. And one of the settlements is called Ba'ali Mukhmas, which is literally higher Mukhmas. And it's like, again, it's like always appropriating, always not original. And so that's built on our land. And there's another settlement built on our land as well. So for us, we had land theft. We've had uprooted olive trees. There's specific land that's literally my parents, both sides of my parents own, that we cannot reach anymore. Like, it's been taken. We can't pick those olives. We can't do anything with it. So that's the way our village is now. And they closed all entrances of our village now. We only have one entrance, and we're still in that concentrated part. And we still have like olives within that circle. But yeah, most of the land that's outside of that area has been taken. So that was our effect through the occupation.
Wow. And so what did your parents and grandparents do for a living at that time? And what was your education like? Can you give us like a paint us a picture about that part of your lives?
Yeah, so both sides of my family, because everybody's a landowner in our village, so it's mostly olives, but they also actually had a lot of other farming. So under Ottoman Palestine, there's records through the Ottoman Empire, which the Ottoman Empire is known for being an extremely diligent record keeper, which is great. They have records of our village farming, producing, and selling to specific people in Al-Quds, and exporting to people in the Quds, and then they would sell it to like the rest of Palestine. So that's really cool. And they had a lot of different things that they were growing, like fruits and vegetables and olives. As the occupation came in and started restricting all that farmland and squeezing us, we were not able to depend on being full-time farmers anymore, because that was like the main thing that we were doing. So people started thinking about, okay, I should go outside of the village and get an education. So my mom's oldest brother went to American University of Beirut, and he studied there. Her other brother went to Jordan and Lebanon as well, and he studied out there. My dad ended up, he traveled a lot. He went to Jordan, he went to Algeria actually to teach Arabic, because at the time Algeria went through its decolonization process, and they wanted to reclaim their Arabic language, because when the French controlled them, they were like banning Arabic as much as possible. So my dad was one of the many Palestinian teachers that were actually sent to Algeria to teach Algerians Arabic, to reclaim that part of their identity. So that was how like the jobs started shifting from farming land and staying on your land to figuring out other ways of making an income. And my dad from Algeria came to the States to also get another college degree, and he graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson University in 1970. So, and then he ended up staying here as well. So that was like, it was like a forced shift. I mean, without the occupation, without anything, I'm 100% sure it would still be there, and just living that kind of, I guess people would get educated, they would go to college, but it would be by choice and interest, rather than like, you have to do this because you can't stay living off your land.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that those are two like main points that I think people don't really understand when it comes to Palestine. It's a lot of us, a lot of our families, our living wage was coming from the land itself, and that's why the olive branches and the trees are so important in our culture. The watermelon is such an important part of our culture, and that's why, like, I've heard so many stories of like older men, ya haram, like having like heart attacks from seeing their livelihoods being taken away and being ruined. And that's something like native people to the land take care of the land. They don't destroy it. They don't do bad things to it. They preserve it. They cultivate things out of it. And it's so sad to hear the stories of people just losing their livelihoods because of the occupation. And then to your second point, it's like the education part, like Palestinians as a whole, I think we have like a reverence for education. Like, we want to be educated. We're very smart people and we are very successful. And when we set our minds to something, it's we can achieve anything. So um it's it's such a bittersweet story to hear you say kind of like the way that your parents made do with what they were, dealt with. So mashallah alayhum, yani. I'm like very proud to hear that about your family. So
I just wanted to add that education, a lot of times because we're used to it from the colonizer's mindset, so we think education only comes from a college degree, from an institution. My grandmother died at 106. And if to me, she was one of the smartest, most educated human beings I've ever met. She didn't go to school, obviously. She didn't go to college, but she had so much life experience and so much wisdom, and she knew so much. And I think a lot of times people like try to paint Palestinians, especially from the colonizers, oh, they were peasants, oh, they were farmers. But the amount of knowledge that they had, the amount of medicine that they had, the amount of nutrition that they had, knowledge about things that are now like the Western world, quote unquote, is discovering, right? They think it's like, wow, like meditation is so good for you. Well, as Muslims, we pray 5 times a day, and that's kind of like your break. And you're like, and even Islam itself has tadabbur in it, which is actual meditation to just literally sit and think and ponder. And so a lot of times when we say, and even from a Western perspective, Palestinians are actually one of the most educated people on the planet. We have the highest literacy rates, the highest degrees, graduate degrees, and things like that. But we were also extremely educated before that like type of education became a thing, right? Palestinians are extremely knowledgeable. They know so much history. They know so much culture. They know so much about the world. Yes, because we had so much life experience. Like my grandmother lived through Ottoman Palestine, British Mandate, Israeli occupation, all of those experiences. And they interacted with so many different people and so many different things. And they had such a worldview. Like my great grandfather was born probably in the late 1800s. And he, in 1910, which was still Ottoman Palestine, he had a curiosity about the world. He wanted to travel. And things were shifting with the Ottoman Empire, obviously, and we're going downhill at that point. But he wanted to just be more, even though they were still very safe and very fine in our village. And he decided to move to the United States. And his wife, my great-grandmother, and my grandfather and his brother, they only had the 2 boys, were like, no, we're not moving. Like, this is our village. We're happy. We love it here. And so he decided to move by himself. So he took a ship from Haifa to Italy, from Italy to New York. And he ended up living here for a couple of decades. And his experience was like very different because he did all that stuff. And it was, when you think about like somebody from a small village being like, oh, I'm just going to go to America because I just want to see it. It wasn't like forced on him. He wasn't like stuck in any circumstances. And so it always, pains me that Palestinians, we were forced to sort of be in the diaspora and be in all of these things when we had all of these things, but they were part of us, right? Like we always were very worldly and very like, we knew so much about the world and we wanted to see the world in our own way. But yeah, it is a shame that, through occupation, we were kind of pushed into that direction.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you were talking about your grandmother, right, who lived until she was 106 years old. What are some of the things that you've learned from her, whether that's like traditions or like pieces of wisdom? Like what are some things that you've learned from her?
My grandmother, one of the things she would always do is she would always do tasbih, like dhikr, under her olive trees every single day between Asr and Maghrib. And she would always say that like the trees need to hear this, or the trees like love hearing this, or they
so beautiful.
Grow better when they hear this. And she always had cats, obviously, that she would always feed. Her diet was so strict, and she would be like a nutrition for if like in this world that we live in today. She had the same like meals every single day at the same exact time, and she would be like, "This is how we stay healthy, and this is what we do." She would make tomato juice from actual tomatoes in her house, like squeeze it, drink it every day. She would eat zit and zapat, obviously, for breakfast. And she would always say, she would have like meatless, now it's like trendy meatless Monday. She would always have like 2 days a week where she would just eat plant-based food, which is very Palestinian. I mean, now we can't even fathom it, right? Like if I tell my husband I'm not cooking chicken or meat, it's like, well, then you're not cooking at all. It's like, no, like there's so many recipes in our tradition that are purely vegetarian or vegan.
Mhm.
And that's why we were healthy for so long. The Mediterranean diet is known as like one of the best
Mhm.
to achieve like a very balanced and healthy diet. So she would have like 2 meatless days a week. 3 days she would eat meat, especially bone broth. That was very important. And she was always lived her life by the sun and like the adhan, which
Mhm.
I miss so much about Palestine itself because everybody lives like that.
Mhm.
I feel like here living in the United States, it's about the clock, and it doesn't matter what the season is or what month it is. It's just always like 8 to 3 or 9 to 5 or whatever. Over
Mhm.
there, work changes with the sun and the
Mhm.
season.
Mhm.
So when it's winter, you work less because it was cold and it got dark really early.
Mhm.
It was normal. Like even with the land, my grandma would say like obviously in the winter they would just can their foods or preserve their food and like kind of stay home and just chill and do like sewing clothes. Like she made all her own clothes and all her own stuff. So that's what she would do like in the winter season. And in the summer and the spring, yeah, you were out and about harvesting, staying out later because the sun was out later.
Mhm.
So all of these things that like now we're discovering like circadian rhythm is so important. You're supposed to like
Yeah.
move with the season. You shouldn't exert yourself so much in winter. All of it was so basic to them. It was like so basic to my grandma because she was much older and she kind of was like a little time capsule. She
Mhm.
was living that way, even though everybody else around her was younger and changing. But it was lights out at limited. Like we couldn't visit her
Yeah. Yeah.
after
Yeah.
then. It wasn't. She would Sunday stay in her
Yeah.
house, read Quran, eat dinner, pray Aisha, go to sleep at Aisha. Like she prays Aisha and goes to bed, wakes up
Mhm.
with Adhan al-Fajr. Like that was her life the whole time. And so those are like beautiful things that like now people are like, oh yeah, you should do that for your wellness. You should do that for your mental health. And it's like, that was just her basic life. So she was definitely just full of so much just information that we now think, oh, I should follow somebody on Instagram to learn that or something like that.
Yeah.
That was just her natural
That's so
baseline.
beautiful. That's so beautiful. Have you gotten to visit Palestine at all in your lifetime yet?
Yeah, so I was born here in the United States, but my parents wanted us to grow up in Palestine to have the identity, the language, everything. And I'm so grateful for that because I'm a native Arabic speaker and I know so much about it there. So I grew up there as a child. When the Intifada happened, my dad was freaking out. So he was like, you guys need to move here to the United States. And when we moved, that year was now as an adult reflecting back on it, it was so jarring because it was like being literally ripped from your home
Mm.
and being told you're going to live in this new place. Mind you, I used to come to the United States in the summer because we have a lot of family here, and we would visit my dad when because he was working here. We'd visit here in the summer, but the concept was like we're here on vacation and we're going back home.
Mhm. Mhm.
When the switch happened, and my parents were like, "Okay, now we're going to live here and we're going to visit Palestine." It was that year. I remember it was like just painful. It was so uncomfortable. Everything was like I remember it snowed so much here and I hadn't been here in the winter. And
Mhm.
I was like a grown child. I was here as a toddler, but like,
Yeah.
not with recent memory. And I was like, so cold. There's so much snow. Like, what is this place? And it was just, and I remember the first time we went back to Palestine, probably the year after that, we went back for the summer and it was like, relief, like we're finally here. But then we had to come back here because my parents decided we were just going to live here full time and visit there. So we would visit every single summer throughout high school. And then in college, I would still visit in between. Whenever I had time, I would visit. So definitely. And then after law school, I was feeling just really out of place and really confused and just not happy with like my job or what I'm doing as a lawyer and stuff like that. And I was like, I just need to go home. I'm just going back to
Mhm.
Palestine. And I went back and I lived there for a few years and I got a job in the human rights sector. And it was just nice to just go back and live there and just literally just reconnect physically and be like, I'm here. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when I got married and wanted to have kids, I ended up moving back here to be closer to my family because they were living here
Mhm.
full time as well. So that's how I ended up back here again.
Yeah.
But alhamdulillah, no, it's been a huge part of my life throughout my life.
Wow, that's so I'm jealous. It's obviously like a dream of mine to go visit. But actually similar to you, I grew up in the States mostly, but like my parents they work for the US government, so we moved around a lot growing up and the in my high school years, like the closest I got was Abu Dhabi. Like we lived in Abu Dhabi for 3 years. I graduated high school there, and then I moved back to the States for college. And then after college, started working in the interior design industry, um, and then I got laid off from my job last year. So my mom is posted here in Egypt right now, and I was like, this is my chance. Like I'm gonna take a sabbatical and just go like live my life for a little bit. And it's been so rewarding. Like here, I feel seen, I feel respected, I feel heard, like I feel um I don't want to leave. You know what I mean? Like everybody
Mhm.
here in Egypt is like, if they hear that you're Palestinian, they like roll the red carpet out and they're just like, we're honored to be in your presence. And it's just like, it's like funny, but at the same time, you're just like, oh, like that's so sweet of you to like say something like that, you know? Um, so I understand the need to just like go back home and like feel like yourself again, I think. Which brings me to my next question. Like right now living in the US, um I was obviously, I'm just here and it's a different perspective, so what is it like right now living in the US for you?
During this specific time, I mean, the past
Yeah.
few months,
Yeah.
I'm mostly a homebody, so I haven't really experienced much because I have two
Mhm.
toddlers and stuff, so we're pretty much home. But throughout my experience, there was, at least as a Palestinian growing up here, going through, it's always been like when you say you're Palestinian, it's like you're telling it, like it's like big. It's like
Yeah.
they don't need, like the word is like a bomb or something. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, oh my God. And I remember the first year that we moved here because of the Intifada, we had to go to public school for 6 months, and it's the only time I've ever been in the public school in my entire life. And I remember switched so many schools that year. I literally switched 3 schools because we were like moving around trying to figure out where we want to stay. I remember it was like chapter on the Greeks. I learned it in one school. And then when I transferred to that public school, they were starting that same chapter in their book. And I was like, oh, I've taken this before. Like, why am I repeating this? And this boy asked me, like, what did you say? And I'm like, I literally just took this in the school I was in 2 months ago, and I'm transferring here. And you guys are starting it. Like, it's annoying. So he tells this other kid, and this other kid, he's older than me. He was like in 8th grade, comes up to me and he goes, I heard you said something like you don't like something. And I was like, yeah, I don't, I took the same lesson already. I'm just bored in class. And he was like, where are you from? And it was weird because I was like Arab and like, it was
Yeah.
already different. They were mostly white kids. And I was like, I'm Palestinian. And he goes, oh, so you don't like Israelis or Jews or whatever. And I was like, well, I was literally 11 years old. And I was like, no, because that's why I'm here. If they weren't stealing my land, I would be there right now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't like it, and that's all I said. And of course, they reported it to the teacher, and the counselor had to get involved. And I remember the school called my dad, and they were like, we have a concern about your daughter. And he's like, what? And he goes, your daughter's anti Semitic. And my dad's like, first of all, like, my dad, like, he does not take BS from anybody. Um, and he was like, what did you just say? She's an 11-year-old. Like, what are you trying to say about my kid? And they're like, your daughter's anti Semitic and it needs to be addressed. And she made a comment in class about not liking, like Israelis or whatever. And he's like, yeah, obviously, she's literally here because of that. Like, she would be home right now if this wasn't the case. So
Yeah.
this is her life experience. She's not saying anything like new. Like, and if somebody asks her about it, yeah, she's going to answer as it is. And they're like, well, that's very concerning. And, it makes other people feel uncomfortable. And he's like, my daughter's uncomfortable. It was like ripped from where she was living from. Like, I don't understand what this is. And so for the rest of the year, the counselor had to follow me around campus, literally. In recess and lunch, she would have to sit behind me. On a field trip, she would have to come with me. And I remember we were in class, in a different class, and the teacher, there was a map, obviously, it's always the map. And
Yeah.
some kid goes like, that's Israel. And I'm like, no, it's not, it's Palestine. And the teacher's like, well, I was like, no, it's not. And so all of these, like, and this is like my 11-year-old experience. And I was so new. I was so fresh from the blast. And I was like, who are these people? Why are they denying the existence of like truth? That's what it felt
Yeah.
like. And that's what it is, actually. Like, that is the reality.
Yeah.
But as you get older, and it keeps happening, and it kept happening, and especially in law school. I mean, law school was like, it was everybody. I was the only girl in hijab in the whole law school. Law school's 3 years. I was the only one in that entire building. And so all the professors like zoomed in on me because I was the only one. And I was like, I'm going to be super prepared. Like, you know, I whatever comes at me, I'm just going to go with it. But they were extra nice because they didn't want me to feel like they were treating me different because I'm in hijab. But there was always these like microaggressions. Like I remember there was an actual Israeli soldier in my class. And he would come up to me and be like, you know, I was like in the Israeli army, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, like, what do you want from me? He's like, you know, we're not all bad. Like, I like Makluba and, you know, I like Palestinians. And I was like, listen, you're telling me this now. You probably stopped me at a checkpoint at some point. You probably told me I can't go from here to there. You probably like harassed somebody I know. Like, let's not play each other. I'm Palestinian. You're an occupier. You're occupying my land. Like, we're not about to like
be friends.
Make this like anything. Yeah, we're not about to make this anything that it's not. And he was like, no, blah, blah, blah. He, like, for the whole 3 years, he was like trying to be my friend. And I'm like, there's nothing here. Like, this is literally not it. Like, this is not a thing. Yeah. And so, and I remember another professor who wasn't my teacher, but he wanted me to compete for his competition. And I was like, I don't want to. And he was like, no, come to my office. Let's talk about it. And when he asked me again, I was like, no, I don't want to compete. Like, I'm done with that. He was like, well, I'm going to ask you about Palestine. And I was like, what do you want to know? And it's like, it's like there, you know? And he was like, well, as a Jewish person, I wouldn't feel safe there. And I went to Bethlehem and I didn't tell anybody I was Jewish because I was afraid for my life. I was like, well, you were wrong. If you told people you're Jewish in Bethlehem, they would have been really nice to you because you're just projecting your violent tendencies onto us. Just because white people, like literally white colonizers, Zionism is just a white colonial project anyway. Don't project your violent tendencies onto us. And when I said that to him, it was like, he was like hit with cold water. I don't think he's ever been told that before. And he was like, what? I was like, yeah, just don't assume. Like, don't assume. And then he was like, well, you know, Arabs in Israel are very happy and they live like really good lives. I was like, really? That's like saying Black people in Jim Crow era were really happy because Palestinians in Israeli part are not allowed to buy houses in certain neighborhoods. They're not allowed to rent in certain neighborhoods. They're not allowed to study certain things. They're not allowed to attend certain colleges. It's literally Jim Crow. Was Jim Crow nice? Do you agree with Black people being marginalized from universities, from neighborhoods, from schools because of their skin color or because of their ethnicity, whatever you want to call it, just a label? And he was like, what? And I was like, it's the same thing. Yeah. Like, let's forget the occupation part. Like, let's even put the stealing land part on a side. Like, let's not even put that on the table. Let your brain understand that, like, as a Palestinian with an Israeli passport, you're treated differently, just like a Black person is treated in America. Obviously, till this day, there's problems, but it was much more systemic and like obvious, right? It was legal for a university to say, you can't get into the med school because you're Black. And it's so today, it's legal in Israel to do anything and say, you can't do this because you're Muslim / Arab / Palestinian / even Christian Palestinian, whatever they want to use. And he was like shocked. And I was like, how does this news you? Like, how are you talking about something that you know nothing about? And I was like, you're a law professor. If you can't understand laws that are designed to discriminate against other people, and you're in America, and you haven't learned anything from Black history, from Indigenous history, from anything, what are you doing? And I literally was like, what are you doing? Yeah. And he was like shocked. And he was like, you know, I wouldn't say these things to somebody if I were you. I was like, did I say these things to you, or did you call me to your office and ask me about them? He was like, I called you. I was like, all right then. I'm here, I'm going to school, I'm taking my classes, I'm doing my job. Yeah. If you want to come at me and ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. But I'm not out here like screaming about it. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm done here. Bye. You know? So those are like the moments. I've had so many of these kinds of moments. I haven't had like things in the past couple of months, but those are like things that would just, I'm sure, happen to every Palestinian, like everywhere, all the time.
Yeah, and it's like back to your point, like, well, I'm like Jewish and they're gonna treat me differently in Bethlehem if that was like known that I'm Jewish. It's like, no, it's not because you're Jewish. It's because you're a Zionist. Like, there's a
Literally.
difference. And every Palestinian will make that differentiation between
100%.
a Jewish person and a Zionist. And unfortunately, we are not granted the same when it comes to our, like, no, she's Muslim, not a terrorist, or like, it's just like there's no differentiation between that. And of course the media takes it and runs with it, and then we're stuck with, hello, like, people are being killed constantly, like, and like, have you I saw something on circulating on social media that was just like, um think about it. On the screen, have you seen a Palestinian person in military gear and guns on the screen? Or is it always an Israeli soldier in his uniform with the weapons and a tank or whatever? And it's like simple. It's like so true. Like, you don't see there a Palestinian in military clothes having weapons on them on the screen. They're regular people who have lives, who have children, who are just trying to seek safety in a shelter somewhere, who are wearing jeans and flip-flops. Like, it's just that simple. And people like to spin it, and the media especially likes to spin it, and then we're the ones stuck explaining all the time and having to teach people all the time. And I feel quite exhausted by it. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way the settler colonialism isn't new, right? The United States is a settler colonial project on Turtle Island. It's rooted in genocide and land theft.
Mm-hmm.
The Zionist project in Palestine is exactly the same. It's just the settler colonial project rooted in genocide and land theft. The difference is the Israeli project is the first one ever to market itself as a victim at the same time. So they are the colonizer and they're somehow the victim at the same time. Because even the colonizers of Turtle Island didn't see themselves as victims of the indigenous people. They just thought they were superior, civilized, it's manifest destiny. And it's the same like idea, like God wants me to have all this. So I'm just going to take this entire continent and run with it. But they never said like, oh, like the indigenous people are oppressing us. That wasn't like, I mean, yeah, they complain when like indigenous people resist, which every colonizer complains when the indigenous resist. But the way the Zionists have like completely shifted the narrative, and they are somehow the victim with the tanks, with the rockets, with the rifles, with everything. And they're a victim to a child with a stone, right? That child is a threat. And I remember that happened to me. I was in my village and I was going, because I did my senior year in Palestine as well, of high school. And they closed the entrance of our village. And like the little mayor of our town tried to talk to the soldiers and they weren't having it. And I just went up to them. I'm just going to talk to them. And everybody's like freaking out, like, don't do it. And I'm like, whatever, let's just go. And I went and I'm like, does anybody speak English? And the guy's like, I do. And of course he was from New Jersey. Of course he was an American Zionist. And it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you be here? Why wouldn't you? So anyway, so I was like, what are you doing here? He's like, we had to close off the village. Some kids threw stones at our Jeep from your village. I was like, okay, you're holding a rifle that's taller than me, straight up. Like I'm short, like it's really tall, long. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, yeah. And it's stolen from a child, throwing it at your Jeep. Does it really affect your life? He's like, no. So I was like, are you really closing down an entire village, not letting people go to school or college or work or doctors or whatever they need to go to just because of that? And he was like, well, those were the orders. And I was like, you don't think? Like, you don't even think you don't do math? Like, is this necessary? And he was like, oh. And it's always jarring for them because when he realized we were from the same state, and we were like the same, and he couldn't do this to me. If me and him got on a flight that same day, landed here in JFK and went to New Jersey, there's no way in hell he could stand on my street with a rifle and be like, don't move, / I could kill you and get away with it. Because in that moment, he could have shot me and nothing would happen. Like, absolutely nothing. My family would bury me. He would continue. He'd get on a flight back to America and do whatever he was doing. And I think for him, and I've had another moment like that with another soldier, it's like they're so like block in their minds of what reality is and what, like, he saw himself as a victim. Like, these kids threw stones at the Jeep I was driving. Like, I'm a victim and I need to protect myself. And it's like, when you finally like break that down and you're like thinking, like, are you using your brain? And he was like, oh, okay, let me talk to like the other soldiers or whatever. And he went and talked to them and he convinced them to like open it and let us through. But that's not easy to do. It's not easy to take one-on-one person and have them break down like the brainwashing and the mental blocks. And I'm not giving excuse to any Zionist. I'm the last person that will ever show sympathy to an Israeli settler, a colonizer, a Zionist. I am the last. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying, like, it's just the reality of it. And we, as Indigenous people, we are not responsible. Like you're saying, we're exhausted. We are not responsible for you to see the light. You need to see the light on your own. And especially now with social media and the internet and information being so available, if you can't work on your own brainwashing, that's your problem. It's not my burden to unbrainwash you. But in the moment, if there's an opportunity, sure, let's take it. But like, it really is so entrenched. And when I think about even the United States, I mean, it's such a good job marketing itself. Yeah. That people don't know that there's Indigenous people here. I was in Palestine, in Jenin camp, and I was translating English to Arabic. And this old man comes up to me and he goes, "How do you know so much English?" And I was like, "Well, I was born in the States and I went to school there and, I know English." And he goes, "How? You're not white." And I was like, "Well, my mom and dad are both Palestinian. I was just physically born there, but I'm genetically like you. I'm like 100% Palestinian." Yeah. He goes, "But like how? Like you're not white skinned." And I was like, "Well, actually, those people are not from that land. Like that, there's Indigenous people up Turtle Island, and they're colonizers, just like the Israelis who stole your house, and you're in a Jenin refugee camp right now." And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's a settlement. Like it's a big, huge settlement." And he was shocked. And this is an Indigenous person that went through settler colonialism, has no idea that this other country that affects his life so much, right? We know the United States is a huge sponsor of our suffering. And he had no clue that the United States was a settler colonial project, just like Israel. And even my great-grandfather, when he came to the United States, he didn't know. Mm-hmm. He just, like, they advertise so much, like this new land, this new place, this new whatever. When I think about my great-grandfather, he is very fair-skinned, has light brown hair, so he's very white passing. Mm-hmm. And so when he moved to the United States, he had he like posted on white privilege. They just assumed he was European, and he had blended in. He was a firefighter in New York City. He like lived, very white privileged kind of life. When I think about my great-grandmother, his wife, who said, "No, I'm not moving with you." She's very dark skinned, has very dark hair, has very dark eyes. And I'm like, if they had moved together and her kids looked like her, they were dark skinned with dark hair and dark eyes. If they had all moved together as a family, how my great grandfather's perception of this country would have been completely different. Yeah. Because they would have treated his wife as a person of color. Mm-hmm. And it was 1910. Mm-hmm. So when you think about it, if 1950s were bad, we're talking about 1910. It was like much worse. And how his wife would probably not be allowed to be in the neighborhood that he was living in, or in the hotel that he was staying in, or in the restaurant he was eating in. He was known to eat like certain restaurants that even my dad visited, that they were still open when my dad came here and stuff. And I'm sure she would not be allowed to eat with him. She wouldn't be allowed to sit with him. So he had a very narrow view of what the United States was, because he didn't realize that his skin color gave him a very different experience than his wife and kids would have had. And when he moved back to Palestine, and my dad was very close to my great-grandpa because it was his grandpa, he gave him a very like nice view of America. It was like very like positive and very good perception. So when my dad came here for college, he came with those ideas. Mm-hmm. My great uncle moved to the United States as well, and somebody else from our village was with him, and that person had dark skin and actually very curly black hair. Mm-hmm. And when they first arrived, they wanted to go eat in a restaurant, and the restaurant said, "You can't come in." And my great uncle was like, "We have money. Like, what are you talking about?" And he was like, "Well, you can come in," because he was like fair skinned and had light hair, but your friend can't. And my great uncle was like so confused, because alhamdulillah, we don't have that in Palestine. Like, that doesn't exist. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So he was like, "We both have money. Like, I don't know what you're saying." And the guy goes, "He can't come in because of his skin color." And my great uncle was like, "What does skin color have to do with food?" Like, straight up, like, that was his answer. What does his skin color have to do with food and money? And he was like, "We don't serve colored people." And my great uncle was like, what are you talking about? Like, that makes no sense whatsoever. He's like, that's the rules. And so my great uncle was like so confused, and he didn't last here that much. They were here for like a little bit, and he moved back, and he told all these stories to everybody. He was like, that place is sick, like literally. So he had a very different experience because he had somebody with him. So he noticed the difference in treatment. And they both went back to our village and were like, that place is really messed up. And they're like, everybody's like, why? And they're like, they don't serve you if you have like a certain skin color or hair texture or whatever. And everybody in the village is like, what? What does that even mean? What are they talking about? Because it was like, there's no phones, there's no internet, there's no radio, there's no nothing at the time. And everybody was like, now this new perception of like, wow, this place is really weird. Like, that place, those people are messed up people. But then when the 1967 happened and the occupation came and people were forced to leave, then they felt forced to come here. And so, but now the other generation's perception was very much more realistic than my great grandfather who came in 1910 and the few others who came who probably looked like him and had a different experience. So they came in here like, okay, this place is racist. This place has its problems. We have to just do this to provide for our families, because they would just send money back home and work and study and go to college. But it was a very much realistic thing. So settler colonialism and all these empires, I mean, they paint themselves in such a good light. They advertise so well. And that's why, like, till today, you'll find people who are pro-Zionism or pro-Israeli who think that Israelis are oppressed by Palestinians. And Palestinians are killing them and invading their land and like all these crazy things.
Yeah.
And when you look back and it's like, this is the ethos of settler colonialism. They're very good at the narrative. They're very good at spinning stories. And they will make people believe something that's just not realistic. And that's why a lot of people who come to Palestine physically, the minute they get there, they're like, oh, I get it. Even if they were like pro-Israeli, but they saw the reality, or they were neutral, they like swing to the Palestinian side so hard because the reality just slaps you in the face. Just like when my ancestors came to Turtle Island, to the United States, and saw these different experiences based on your skin color or whatever, and they were like, oh, this place is sick. Like, obviously they were advertising it to the world as like the land of opportunity and blah, blah, blah. So it's definitely like such a parallel connections and comparisons that you see between what is considered Americanism and what is considered Zionism. They're very much interconnected, and Zionism is very inspired by Americanism.
Yeah, it's I've heard a lot of people who have gone to Palestine and they're like, yeah, it just like makes sense now. Even like Jewish people who have gone on birthright and then they come back and they're like, what the hell? Like, this is disgusting, actually, like what is happening there. um so yeah, I've heard many stories where people have gone to Palestine and then they come back, they're like, yeah, no, this is not, this is what we've been fed in our schools and over on the media and everything like that. Is It's wrong, all of it is wrong. Like, you just have to go see for yourself. And it's such a sad world that we live in, I swear to God. It's just like, and then you hear like a lot of older Palestinians, and they're like, you ask them about their experience and all of that stuff, and they're like, hik al haya, like this was life, this is what we had to deal with, and they just had to like swallow it and move on with their lives. And it's so sad for me to think about like the struggle that they had to go through, and then their answer is always, well, this is life, this is how it is, we just have to go with it. And it breaks my heart every single time. um yeah.
I mean, one thing Palestinians I'm proud of is that we never take the victim position. Even me growing up in Palestine, being stopped at checkpoints, being treated a certain way, it was never victim. It was like, you are a settler colonist. This is my land. I don't care. Like, it was never like, oh my God, you're so mean to me. No, it was like, it was always ingrained. Like, this is a settler colonist. This is his role. His role is to oppress, to steal, to harm. And my role is to be strong and indigenous and steadfast. And that was ingrained in all of us growing up. And it was just natural. It wasn't something that our parents had to teach or explain. It was like air. Like you didn't notice that it was there, but it was there. And it was so natural for Palestinians who grew up in Palestine. And I think that's the difference between diaspora Palestinians versus Palestinians who are from Palestine itself is that we have a very different perspective because we have the lived experience. I mean, that's really at the end of the day. Palestinians in the diaspora, they see, I noticed they lean a lot more into the apartheid language and the sort of like discrimination language. And yes, that's all there. But at the crux of it, the way Palestinians who grew up in the land, our operation is always resisting settler colonialism. And there's no like if, ands, or buts. It's about pushing settler colonialism off of our land. And I've heard somebody say like a lot of, why would these Palestinians just give up? Like that's it. It is what it is. Just accept that you have an oppressor. But it's not our legacy either. We've been in Palestine on this land for so long, and we've had empire through empire come and go, come and go, come and go, and we've stayed. Like we've never budged from our land. We've always stayed. And yes, blood has been mixed with people that you have such a range look of Palestinians. You have a blonde, blue-eyed Palestinian and somebody with olive skin tone and dark eyes and dark hair through the blood mixing over time. But we always at our root, at our core, we're always Palestinian. And that never, ever shifted, no matter what was going on historically. Empires came and went, occupations came and went. We survived it all. Even the Crusades, I mean, if you ever like go back and look at, they were brutal. They were miserable. They lasted hundreds of years. So the way we operate, like my grandparents and everything, they always say like, it's only been 50 years. It's only been 40 years. Like we can get through this. Like we've been through so much worse. Like our DNA knows, and we know this from science now, like DNA contains information. It knows what your ancestors have been through, and it gives you, it's passed down to you. And that's where like this extreme resilience and stubbornness and insistence of Palestinians comes from. It's not delusional. A lot of people think like, how can you think of a completely free Palestine? There's no way, like, look at all these settlements, look at all these things. It's like, no, it's absolutely possible because we've done it before. The Crusades have been completely removed when they took over. And we've done it before, and so many empires have come and gone, and we have stayed on our land, and we have stayed and stayed and stayed. So the hope for a liberated Palestine, a free Palestine, is very real and very tangible, very possible. It's just about how and when, and that's Allah's, that's in Allah's knowledge. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we know. Our bones know, our DNA knows, we know. It will come.
Yeah, inshallah. So you said that you have kids, so I wanted to ask you, like, how do you keep Palestine alive for them in your household?
So my kids, I mean, they know the flag, obviously. They know Dutcha, they know the music, they know the food, like cook for them Palestinian food. They know so much about it. Like they always say, I'm not Palestinian. Like they know those things. For me, the biggest struggle has been the Arabic language because I keep defaulting into speaking English. And not because I want to. I speak Arabic to them, but not as much as I want to. And my goal was to move to Palestine and raise them there the same way I was raised so they can have the lived experience, the language, it can be native. So inshallah, when everything, gets resolved, that's still definitely on the plan. So that's my biggest fear, is that my kids won't be native Arabic speakers. But if we end up staying here longer because of everything going on over there, I'll put in more effort because language is very important to me, and that they know the language of their land. So that's the biggest worry that I have as a woman. It's like, are they going to know Arabic like I do? Are they going to read it? Are they going to write it? Are they going to be able to communicate naturally in it? So that's been the biggest worry on my mind. But inshallah, I'll figure out a way and get that Arabic into them.
Yeah, I love that. So actually, I wanted to ask you about your dialect, because I noticed that I think it's a little bit more on the Fallahi side, right? Like I heard you say
100%.
Karayib instead of Arayib. So this is I think it's like a nice debate between Palestinians. So is it Knafa or Chnafa?
Never, 100%. Never. I lived in Nablus for a year and I would be like, you guys, it's never. Why can't you say it? And they're like, oh, it's never. I'm like, no, it's never.
That's amazing. I think it's like I hope that your kids inherit that from you too, because I think it's like it's
Oh, they
such a
have
beautiful.
to.
Yeah, yeah.
They have to. My husband speaks Madani, which pisses me off so much. And I'm like, could you just stop? Because he's from Beit Mahtir, which is now the settlement called Beit Meir.
Uh-huh.
So he's from the 48 area, and his grandmother speaks like me exactly.
Yeah.
Like me and her talking the same Fallahi dialect, 100%. We're good. And then he grew up in Ramallah, obviously, because they were kicked out of their village. And so he speaks like this Siri Madani dialect. And I'm like, stop saying that stuff around our children. Because my daughter goes, kursi. And I'm like, spit it out of your mouth. It's like chursi, like get it together. She'd be like, she's like, kursi, mama. I'm like, shut up.
I love that.
Say chursi. So it's definitely been like a problem in the house of like him, the Arabic he's speaking is not the Arabic I support. So I need it. I'm just going to get him on board.
I love that. That's
he's not into me, but it's I'm trying. They need to be Fallahi. I can't. They have to be Fallahi. And he's a real Fallahi. That's the thing. He's just not understanding. If he was still in his village, he would be talking like me too. I'm like, don't bow down circumstances. Stay authentic to who you are.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's my mom grew up in Ramallah. So she has like a Medini accent. And my dad grew up in Jordan, so he has like more of a Jordanian accent. So it's like it's really funny to just like hear different like dialects. And now because I live in Egypt, like I started taking Arabic classes here. Like I speak Arabic really well, but I wanted to like learn more Fusha and stuff. But then I started taking like just colloquial Arabic, because here I get shy speaking in my Palestinian dialect, because some people like they make like comments or they're like, oh, into like Shamia, like what and so last week the Arabic teacher was like, we need to figure this out, like are you speaking an Egyptian dialect or like, because like are we gonna fight, like what's gonna happen? And then after he talked with me for a while, he was like, no, actually I want you to preserve your Palestinian accent. And I was like, I'm so glad you said that, because I'm not gonna speak an Egyptian dialect. Like this is what I'm comfortable with and I have to preserve it. Like there's no question about it at this point. Like nobody's gonna mess with it. So
100%.
yeah.
100%.
So my last question for you before we kind of wrap it up is like, do you have a message to the world about Palestine, or like a message for the people of Gaza right now?
I mean, for the people of Gaza, we are literally just in awe of their steadfastness, of their strength. I mean, they are at the front lines of Palestinian liberation, inshallah. And we owe them so much. And there's literally no way we could ever repay them in this life. And we know that Allah is the most generous and the most kind. And inshallah, they will be compensated in this life and in the next for everything. They have literally everything on the line. I mean, there's no question about that. So all we can do is listen and respect and pray, and they're literally just carrying the entire weight of the world on their shoulders right now. And we just pray for Nasr, inshallah, for their victory and for liberation. For the world, really, Palestine is like the center of the universe, and it always felt like that growing up, but like now being outside of Palestine and seeing it, and now other people are realizing it, especially with this wave of social media picking up and talking about Palestine. Mm-hmm. Palestine is like the temperature of the world, and specifically the Muslim Ummah, but really the world. When Palestine is in a good place, you know that the Muslim Ummah is in a good place. When Palestine is living in freedom, in it's prospering and it's at its peak, you know that the Muslim Ummah as a whole is actually all prospering and all doing well. When you find that Palestine is being oppressed and it's being occupied, which happens through waves throughout history, when you look at the Muslim Ummah, from a top view, you'll see that the entire Muslim Ummah is actually struggling, suffering, and falling apart. So the liberation of Palestine it's essential for the healing of the world, and for Muslims in particular. It really is the answer. If Palestine is doing well, the entire Muslim Ummah is doing well. So it's definitely not just a burden that Palestinians are carrying, especially the people of Gaza, who are really carrying the load. It's definitely up on every single Muslim in the world to do their part, and every human in the world, obviously, to liberate the world from oppression. It's just, we all have to do our part, and no matter how small, like you said, preserving your language, something that seems small, that's so extremely important. Like, I had somebody tell me, like, well, you're American. Like, if your great grandfather, came here more than 100 years ago, you're American. And I'm like, no, we're not. Even my great grandfather, he never switched his identity. He was like, I'm just Palestinian. I'm moving through the world, but I'm still Palestinian. My grandfather refused to move to America. My dad ended up moving. And so, yeah, we've been through generations of like coming back and forth to this place, but it never, ever, ever had us question our identity. We're 100% Palestinian. No matter where you put us on the planet, our like literally physical, genetic, spiritual minds, brain, all of it, we're just Palestinian. It doesn't matter where we're located physically on earth, we're Palestinian. And so I think everybody, whatever their indigenous culture is, whatever their language is, hold on to that, because that gives you strength, gives your children strength. And it really, all of us can resist settler colonialism and white supremacy in our own way, and we should be doing it. No matter what that way is for you, you can figure that out about yourself, but just do it. Every form of resistance is worthy, and every form of resistance makes a difference.
I love that. That is such empowering advice. Thank you so much for sharing your family's story with me today. And I love your perspective and the way that you stood up to so many people in your life, and stood your ground. That's so like absolutely admirable, and total respect to you. So thank you so much, Meha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Saja. Thank you for having me.
If you resonate with our stories and want to become friends with a Palestinian, I highly encourage you to visit our website, www.thepeopleofpalestine.com, and sign up for our Olive Branch program. Once you sign up, you'll be paired with a Palestinian pen pal. It's just our way of extending an olive branch to you and welcoming you into our community. Don't forget to follow us on social media at The People of Pali on Instagram and TikTok, and subscribe to our podcast. Until next time, Salam.